Welcome back to part 2 of our series with Lee Kemp.
Which he would have done with anybody. You know, Dan was really, he worked with people that wanted to work with him. He ran tough practices, but by the time they were over, most people wanted to get out to get a break. But we would stay and just wrestle. I couldn't get enough of that with him.
We'd like to thank our sponsor, Band. Band is a free team communication app chosen by over 150,000 coaches of all sports. We've also been using Band for our competitions at USA Wrestling and for our National Coaches Education Program. And Band has really helped us send timely communication to all of our coaches and club directors. Search for Band on the App Store or visit their website at band.us to learn more and to try it out today. We've been using it extensively in our coach education program because it's got tremendous functionality and because it's safe. Only the people you invite can join if you choose those settings. Way better than what we've been using in the past. And so jump in and join Band today.
Today, we have an opportunity to visit with a very special gentleman, Lee Kemp. Lee, really excited to have you here for our Coaches Council podcast, our Heads Up podcast. Mike, I'm really excited about this one. This is an opportunity. Here we are at the United States Olympic Training Center, Colorado Springs. We happen to run into Lee. Lee's working with the national team. We were just finishing up with our developmental camp here today and tomorrow. So how could we not bring in Lee Kemp?
And we didn't work out that much after that first year because I think they realized that this is going to be an ongoing thing. So 79 and 8 after that, you know, he was always in the room. But it would have been great if we had those extra weight classes like they have now. Then we could have both been on the world teams. We would have been battling out for the Olympics, but so we could still be world champions and we could have worked out together quite a bit. Just like you see Dake and Taylor working out a lot now.
Yeah.
We could have benefited a lot from that.
We've had a few conversations over the years, and to me, the word that sort of stands out, the type of character that you represent is your resiliency. You've had some challenges. You've gone through some tough times. You know, the Olympics, personal life stuff, but you always seem to get bounced back on your feet. You still are a giver. You come out to camp to help out with these athletes. You spoke to our developmental group yesterday. What's your message to a lot of the coaches or other athletes that might be listening to this in regards to being resilient, about being able to fight back through some pretty tough times?
You know, I'm glad you asked that because that's the key to all of us sitting here today. If it wasn't for my high school coach, in fact, he was the one that I picked to do my induction to the Hall of Fame. Without him, he wasn't even a wrestler, really. You know, he just spent more time with me than he did with his family, as most coaches probably do. You know,
right.
But without him, I would never have went to that camp. I was my first year of wrestling. I didn't know anything about wrestling camps, and it wasn't like social media. You could find them. They were in a wrestling magazine that comes out once a quarter. You know, I would have known about a wrestling camp, but he gathered us all, 4 of us, and drove us to this camp that Gable was at. They were training for the Olympics. So to the coaches, I would say, your educators, your teachers, your fathers, your surrogate fathers, as you know, you're in an era where there are a lot of kids being raised in single-parent homes now. It wasn't that prevalent in my era, in my day. I don't think it was anyway. At least I didn't see it. But there are, I grew up in a small town too, Chardon, Ohio, and even in Cleveland. When I grew up in Cleveland, right on the outskirts of we weren't in the inner city, but we were in the city. You know, it was a black community. There were no single-parent homes there. It was just weird. Back in the '60s, it was just a different day and time then. You know, all the men were home. They had beautiful yards, and they were, people who knew you, your family. If they saw you messing up, they would reprimand you. That's kind of how it was. A lot of communities do that. So I would say to the coaches that, you know, what you do for these young men and women now is you can't even put a value on it because it's so vast, it's so immense. What you impart into these athletes, and it's not just wrestling technique and medals, because my coach didn't know I was going to be a state champion. He was just doing things for me that he was doing for everybody else. So in terms of what the athletes, from the athlete point of view, it taught me perseverance. Without wrestling, I wouldn't have known what that was. The first lesson in perseverance and discipline I learned the first time I cut weight. And the funny thing about wrestling, weight cutting is a part of it, but no one teaches you how to do it. They may do it now with all the sophistication and stuff, but
they don't always.
When we were wrestling, there was no one teaching.
No.
So,
And what you did here was probably wrong.
yes, but to get on that scale in the 70s, you had to have some discipline. Even if it was short-term discipline and just starving yourself for 2 days in a row. But think about that, how difficult that is mentally to do that. So even though it's all wrong, it's bad for your body, but there's some mental toughness there that you can discipline yourself just to make weight.
Now we just call it fasting.
No, we just call it fasting. That's a better word. We all did
We
that.
were fasting a lot back then.
So I learned that. I learned all that. I remember the first time I had to cut weight. I was a freshman. I wrestled exactly what I weighed on the freshman team. And the guy right below me had a hard time making 32, so he bumped up and he beat me in the wrestle off, so I didn't have a spot unless I went down to 132. So I weighed naturally 138. So the coach said, well, you can make 132. And I thought, yeah, sounds reasonable to me too, right? Or 6 pounds, I think it was, or whatever. 138 to 132. 6 pounds sounds easy. Yeah, I can do that. Until I start doing it, 6 pounds, I never cut weight before. No one said anything about it. The meet was coming up and I was not on weight after practice. I was always around 38, 37 maybe, because I was wrestling 138. I was like, 32 seems pretty far away still. And so when I got to like 2 days before, I just stopped eating. No one told me, I just said, I'm not gonna make weight up, I just keep doing this. And so after the practice before the day before the meet, I was still 2 over. And that's after the rubber suits and everything. Man, I'm not gonna make weight. So I just didn't eat anything. I didn't know what was gonna happen. I was too afraid to tell the coach. So I come back to school and I get on the scale and I'm like still a half pound over. And I have until 3 more hours until weigh-ins and I couldn't eat anything else and I stepped on the scale and just barely made it. I'm like, wow, is that what I'm gonna have to do every week to make weight?
This isn't going to be fun.
That was my introduction to weight cutting, as a freshman in high school. But wrestling teaches, that's where the resilience comes from. You have to do that whether you feel good or not. You have to do it whether whether you got homework or not, whether you have this or not, whether you're injured, whether you still have to cut the weight even though you have the defending state champion and you think you're going to get smashed, So wrestling teaches you how to handle pressure, immense pressure. There's no greater pressure than meeting someone in a physical battle. And it doesn't have to be a fight per se, but your presence becomes physical at a certain point. Because like even in business, I've noticed certain men, because I had a career in business where some men would walk into the room. They normally were bigger statured men too. I think that's why the infatuation with heavyweights, like heavyweight boxing champions, all that kind of stuff. But bigger people, they just have this presence, man, and it seems physical almost. To where I can remember being in certain marketing situations where decisions have to be made and you have to kind of defend your position, and this person with this big physical presence kind of imposes that on you, leans forward, and it's almost physical. It felt like it was wrestling. Like this dude is,
and he's manning up on me.
And you feel like intimidated, like okay, now you're not going to say what you really want to say now because this person kind of leans over and and he's a big dude and he's got this nice suit on, maybe and the way you look adds presence on top of that. So I'm in the business world, and then the way that you speak and your language, your vocabulary, all that stuff is all. And so I had to learn. I didn't know where I was going to gain that strength from, but the only place I knew was wrestling. So I just thought, well, I know he can't beat me up physically. so that gave me some physical. So I stood up and said what I wanted to say. I interrupted the meeting and said, well, excuse me, but I think, and they listened because I'm being assertive. Of course they didn't listen, they just went on, but that helped me understand that this is how you have to do this in this world. And without that wrestling background, I would not have been able to do that. Because I felt, and I was still working out then. I would still go work out at high schools, and I still had this physical chip on my shoulder. And so wrestling, I still have it. I don't think anybody can physically beat me up now, even now.
I'm not trying.
So it gives you, not that you need to be, I'm not going to be fighting people or anything like that, but I'm not going to back down from something where if I need to express myself. Like when I went to jail that one time, I'm telling you, there was a time I'm in there, and we didn't really talk about that. So me just to throw that out there, they're going to say, well, what? He said he went to jail.
Watch the documentary. It's fine. I've only watched your documentary like 4 times, so I don't know it all yet.
But there were times where I'm sitting there, and there's some dudes who look like they were used to being there, and they looked a little bigger and stuff, and I could see where people exercise in prison, really. And I started exercising, made sure I was getting my push-ups in and stuff in, and people left me alone, really, when they were picking on other people. And you have to learn certain things, and like stupid stuff. And it wasn't maximum security or anything like that. It was like a misdemeanor type of stuff. But still, there's, like, I saw a fight broke out, people were like, just like kids, and then they're being punished, and I'm like, God, I really wouldn't fight anybody in here, And then you just kind of head it off before it happens. You just stay away from people like that. Once you identify who the bad people are, you just try to stay away from them, and just try to stay to yourself. And you start making friends with certain people. And without wrestling, I would have been really intimidated being in there. And if I didn't have a physical stature from wrestling, and I think people can feel that. See, I know they can, because I can read people.
Yes.
And I can see people read me, and they just didn't want to mess with me. I can tell.
Because you were wearing your world medals too.
They were. If I didn't have them on my chest, they were somewhere in my psyche.
They saw them.
Yeah, they saw them, because I'm thinking, if this guy, that what I saw him do over there, if he did that to me, we're gonna be in a fight, man. I'm not gonna, because you can't back down.
Right.
You just can't. You just can't back down in that environment. So you have to. So I said, okay, you get mentally prepared to fight. Just like wrestling, right? What are you going to do in practice? Or what are you going to do in a match? So resilience, and it teaches you things you never would get in any other way. You just, how would you get that? And as a result of that, it does carry over, because when I was starting my career in business, what I didn't know, just like when I was on the freshman wrestling team, what I didn't know, I had to learn. I had to figure out how to take people down. I had to figure out how to not get taken down. In that business meeting, and I had to go up to my boss and ask questions and let him know I was interested, and ask him, like I even asked him, like, okay, in the meeting, is there anything you could critique me on or whatever, because you're showing. And he did. I see how the meeting, I don't know if I would ask a question in that moment, but he did. That probably wasn't the right time, but I like your enthusiasm. And so you learn, so you kind of understand why he said that. So then you learn when you can jump in and when you can say things. And we had already made a decision to go that direction, so that wasn't the right time. We're not changing now. But 2 weeks ago, jump in there, and when we're in the developmental stages, and so I learned all that from wrestling. And you can learn it in other ways too, but I carry it with me now. I mean, I still know, if I get knocked down, I know I'm just going to get back up again, because that's all I know how to do, is get back up. But if I didn't have wrestling teaching me how to do that, maybe people don't know how to get back up. I've heard that when I talk motivationally and I talk to people. They say, people who've never been in a sport, but now I'm just at a motivational talk, and I'm talking to maybe other people in other disciplines, and they see my documentary and they move, and they say, well, in my world, how do I bounce back from something that really, maybe whatever, something happens and I lose this business sector or this or that, and really it sounds simple, but you just have to, just like in a sport, you get back up, you go back to practice. So what's the equivalent of that in your world? So you got fired from the job that you really wanted, you were vice president, you get back up and you go find another job. It sounds simple, but But sometimes people quit when that happens.
Mhm.
Some wrestlers will quit. They lose that big match, and when they work so hard for it and it didn't work out, they think, well, nothing's ever going to work out. So they don't get back up again, or they don't go back. They don't go back again with the same zeal and zest that they had before. And it's hard to keep coming back with the same enthusiasm after you get slapped down.
Big time.
You get back up again, you get slapped down. So the enthusiasm isn't the same.
Mm-hmm.
What I was able to do is have the same. And I'll just throw this out there too. I think it was good that my kids saw me struggling.
Mm-hmm.
Because children never really, it's like we hide this from our kids. Why would you want your kids to see you and as parents, you may, when you're putting your best face on for your kids, you go to work, they don't know that you just got fired at work, and you probably wouldn't even tell your kids. You get a job before they even, and then now all they know is you just go to work every day. And they find out your life, oh, you didn't have a job for a couple of years? We didn't know. But with my life, they knew I was going through this. So later they've told me that we could see, things were not going well, but you always seem to, I don't know what the words used, but like you didn't let it affect our relationship. You kept showing up every day. You made sure we had everything we needed and all that, all the stuff that you hear. But I didn't know that they were looking at it that way. I was kind of embarrassed. I didn't know what to think about that, but I didn't have a choice anymore because it was pretty obvious things weren't going well for us. So I couldn't hide it. I just had to, if nothing else, I just wanted them to see that I could be there for them when they needed me. And John Bardis kind of told me that. He said, Lee, John Bardis is a good friend of mine. He said, Lee, just one day your kids are going to need you. Just build yourself back up to where when they need you, you can step up.
Powerful.
And so, it's easy to just stay down when you're down. And, that's the easiest place to be. When you start getting back up and showing back up again, it's like, hey, what are you doing here? I thought you had this horrible thing happen to you. Why are you here? People look at you with that look like, why are you here? Well, I'm transparent. I'm here because I'm trying to, whatever. I'm gonna take advantage of what you're taking advantage of, whatever. But there's that look of, why are you here?
Lee, do you always feel like you were that vulnerable? Like today, you're a pretty vulnerable guy. Like you're sharing these experiences. That's what I figured.
You hide it.
Yeah.
John Bardis, again, he was a good friend. Friends pray for you, and there's nothing wrong with praying for you. All the prayers I can give. But that doesn't pay your bills. So it can, some doors open up. But sometimes you need a job. Sometimes you need just a place to live. Sometimes you need stuff. Hey, you can take my guy an extra car when you just take my car as long as you need it. John was that guy. I lived with him for 4 months. He was praying and offering real tangible things to help me. And without that, I don't know where it'd be. It was pretty tough. And he was the one that said to me things like, your kids, yeah, things are rough now, but just get yourself together. You'll have lots of time with your kids. When you're going through it, you don't see that. All you see is you got this ripped away from you, and I'm not getting it back, and they're saying mean things to me because the whole breakups are horrible. Because you have two adult parents acting like 5-year-olds to each other, and then you have other 5-year-olds, your real 5-year-olds are watching it all, so they don't know what to make of all this madness, So, but it takes people like us to step out and see this happening. Like John just stepped out and he reached out and he allowed me to keep my dignity while he was reaching out to me. Because that's kind of hard. You can help a friend or whatever, a loose friend or a friend that's not a real close friend, but just a kind of an acquaintance or a friend. But you can help them by making them get really, really humble, like almost on their knees, and making them feel horrible. Or you can make them let them save all their dignity and still give them the same help. Give an example. I could say, hey, things are really rough for you. If you really need some help, just give me a call. I'll step in and save you. I'm not saying those exact words,
but in essence, yeah.
But then so you think, so I'm not gonna go to you.
Yeah.
John did it in a way where he lets you keep 100% of your dignity. He did it by saying, Lee, why don't you come out to the world team trials? I'm like, well, no, you really need to come out to the world team trials. Just be my guest. I've got he had a suite. We can go do some things together too. Give me a chance. We can just. He didn't really talk about. He didn't mention once what was going on, and I thought he was, and I was trying to avoid the conversation because I knew at some point, here it comes, and he never did. It was all about wrestling. I think you should come out to the. And he knew that once I got back in the arena, he was hoping that a spark would light up. And then that was in 2006. And then I was one of the coaches in 2006. Jimmy Zadek, or Bill Zadek won his gold medal then. So John moved it on to, I think there's a spot for you. We can take you out to, it was in China then. I wasn't doing anything. I was just, we'll take you out to China as a coach. One of the senior world coaches. Daniel Cormier was on that team, so was Ben Askren. So not a word about what was going on in my personal life. It was just, hey Lee, wow. And it wasn't like you have to do this. I just think it'd be good for you. The team could probably benefit from your experience, and so it gave me some purpose, made me feel like I had some value. And then 2006 led to the junior world team in 2007. David Taylor was on that team, and that's when I got to know him. Being the coaching on the team, Bubba Jenkins was on that. So anyway, long story short, it's like that's an approach that John has. When you manage the amount of, when you have the insight that he has, and you all know him too, he just has an incredible amount of intelligence and insight that he parlayed that into helping a friend.
I think that was the era that we were here at camps together.
Yes,
right?
that's why I suddenly just showed up again. I was around again.
Lee's coming in, it's like, what?
Yes, like, where did he come from?
Yeah, it's like, I haven't seen that guy in a while.
So, to the original question, as coaches, as men, as then former, you got to get, it wasn't easy for John to do that because I'm living in his home. How many times do you want someone living in your home, And I'm not the only guy he's done stuff like that for. He's got a lot of stories of stuff, plus humanitarian things that he does. So I get out of my comfort zone now to try to do things when I see an opportunity to try to help someone. And don't use the word help so much because it's not like who am I to help someone? I'm just trying to say a kind word if I can. If I do have a way to help someone, I try to do it. And I really try to think about it because I think about where I was at. Things weren't going so well, and it took some people, in addition to John, to help to get me to a place where, and my kids did come back. Crazy.
Yep.
Everything he said was just right on. And out of a lot of the men that I know that have kids that wrestle and all this kind of stuff, and I was never going to have that. Not that wrestling's the most important thing, but to be able to be a father and have your kid on the mat would have been cool. Whether they ended up being a wrestler or not, I was not going to have that opportunity because in the bitterness of this relationship I was in, she knew that was a way that hurt me to keep my kids. They were young, so my boy was not going to wrestle. And so he just wasn't. And then the breakup happened, so I wasn't with my kids very much at all. And so then I got surrogate kids like coming here. Some of the junior wrestlers. When I went to the junior world team, it was great. I had all these little junior, and they looked me up and they knew who I was, so they gave me a lot of respect and stuff. Like Bubba Jenkins and David Taylor especially. Mm-hmm. That's just the kind of guy he is. He just he just asked me questions and made me feel good about being from Ohio, and I just didn't even think about my personal issues. So all that stuff was just perfect, just to be around that whole thing, and didn't know it was going to happen that way. But all of a sudden, like John said, I get a phone call, and my younger son and daughter want to come live with me. I was like, wow. And then I get him into wrestling. Then he takes 5th in the Illinois State, which is a tough state, large schools, at 160, a real tough weight class. So he's starting to develop as an athlete. I wouldn't be in California if it wasn't for him. And I get to coach him, I got to wrestle with him, I got to do all the things that dads would want to do with their kids. We work out together when he was in high school. It was like I couldn't believe this was all happening, And then he places in the state tournament, and he gets a scholarship. So,
as far as like you touched on it, I've gone through it, the dad coach thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like you had that opportunity. Any information you would like to share with our coaches regarding, because we have a lot of dad coaches.
Yeah.
The good, the bad, any inside advice that you would share?
absolutely. I think I went through all those phases. I think we all have. I've been the good, the bad, the ugly. But probably the ugly comes first, the bad comes next, and then the good, because you finally evolve into understanding what maybe I did 2 years ago when my son was 6 and I went in to beat a kid, I'm yelling at him, that probably isn't the right path, you know? And it doesn't matter if he's a 6 or 7 or 12 or even in high school, that's not the right path really. But I think we've all been in those chairs. I know I have. Because, you know, we think our kid's gonna be better than probably he is, you know, and so we treat him that way, and we think he could have got that takedown. We sure as heck knew we could have got it. So we think, well, why couldn't you have done that? And so we get mad at him. And I went through that phase, and I'm glad I did, because it allows me able to talk about it a little better. And I evolved through, and I evolved through because my son was really intelligent. I give him a lot of credit. You know, one thing I did do, I allowed my kids a chance to speak their mind. So they speak their opinion, and that was good. And my son was, I guess he wasn't intimidated enough. He was confident enough to talk to me about things. And you know, the bottom line, he just told me that, Dad, I'm trying as hard as I can. I'm like, at first, when I was the bad dad, no, you're not. Come on, you can do it. You know, or the ugly dad. Then I became the bad dad, where I'm like, okay, well, maybe, you know, looks like he's working hard, you know. And then the good dad is, hey, it's his life. It's not my life. And maybe I could have gotten out of that hold or done whatever, but if he says he's working hard, hey, he's working hard. You know, there's different levels to this thing, you know. You know, and I check in with the coaches, and the coaches, your son works pretty hard in practice. Is he the hardest working guy in there? Maybe not, but he works hard. Okay, my son is right, he is working hard. And I see him in there, he's not, you know, he's battling like everybody else. It doesn't matter if he wins. I mean, you don't have to win. It's not about the medal, and you asked me that earlier on in the first competition. He's learning and growing and developing, and ultimately it's got to be his goal. He's got to want to do it. And as long as he's doing it to the best of what he thinks his ability is and his effort is, then I'm okay with that. And it's worked out pretty good for him so far.
Yeah. You would obviously not have been able to have that relationship years prior to this, right? That wouldn't have happened. Where you were at, where he was at, that wasn't happening. This became later in evolution.
It is. Right? And when as you were talking, I think I got that because of the gratefulness and humility that I had to go through myself. Because I didn't get my kids back until after I went through all that rough time with that. You know, I mean, I was disgraced. I mean, all that stuff. I mean, I went through, my humility had to be at a place that allowed me to accept people with differences, you know? I mean, you know, you just have to be great. I had more gratitude. And I saw him coming back in my life as just being grateful. Grateful that he was just even out there. So I think what you really mean, or what I'm going to add to it, is if he had never left and the break never happened, and I was his dad when he was young, he would have been wrestling at 5 years old. Maybe that wouldn't have been a good thing.
Right.
And I would have been, you know, this world champion dad. I would have been thinking he could be doing more, and, you know, would have had him doing chin-ups and this and that, and putting a lot of, and so for a 7-year-old to win a national tournament, does that really mean anything?
No.
You and I both can say no all together.
It doesn't mean
all together
anything.
in unison. We can say no.
Yes.
Or even an 8, 9-year-old ran national this or that. Tulsa, Tulsa Nationals is great, cool, but
It's all got to be put in perspective.
exactly. So I might have been that dad if I had a supportive wife and I was, didn't have the bad thing happen to me, and I'm the great Lee Kemp, and my two boys they might have been there. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of glad it didn't happen that way, because I don't know, something would have had to pull me back from that, and I don't know what that would have been. Not all dads are that way, and there's nothing wrong with a kid wrestling at the Tulsa Nationals if dad is really right on top of it, and he knows the kid really wants to be there, and he's ultimately having fun with it.
David Taylor was one of those kids.
Yes.
He was able to do it from a young age, have fun at it, have a healthy relationship with family. It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often.
I think it does take a special individual, I think, as far as dads go, because let's be honest, there's more probably bad examples than there are good examples.
Of course. And I know that I did not pursue coaching as a profession because emotionally it would have been hard for me. Mm-hmm. And I knew that early on because each kid is like your own kid. And what I went through with my own son, but I did that after I went through my problems, so I had more gratitude and I had more humility. If I had never had any of that, I might have been a real hard coach, which might not have been a good thing, because I know some great champions who had to learn once they got into the coaching realm that this isn't me out there.
Right.
I've got to somehow get my athlete to be a little bit different, and that's not easy. Just because you could do it, just as I can do it, doesn't mean that this 18-year-old kid can do it too, like that.
Doc Bennett said to me once, it's important that you realize that wrestling itself is hard. You don't have to, as a parent or coach, make it harder.
And it is harder when you put that.
Yeah.
And I learned pressure.
Yeah.
I remember one day my son, of course I was the dad, I'd go to practice, of course, I'm not going to miss practice. I'm the great Lee Kemp, I'm going to sit in practice, I'm going to have my medal in my bag and show people if they want to see it, So I'm sitting in practice, and I remember I was sitting there, my son just looked really uncomfortable, because we know our kids, and I said, would you rather not come to practice? And he had too much maybe respect for me to say no, but he said no without saying no, because he didn't say anything. He said, well, just put his head down a little bit, and I didn't want to put him through any more anguish, and I said, okay, and I let him off the hook, man. I didn't go to practice anymore. It was just, because I was just there. I was smart enough to not be yelling stuff, but at least I wanted to be there. But it was his thing. I got him into it. Now I'm watching practice and all this kind of stuff, and of course, when I say that, I didn't say much, but there was times when I would see something and I would stand up and go over there and try to show him how to do it right, and I'd sit back down, and then to make it matters worse, the coaches would recognize me and they would say stuff, and then Lee, why don't you come show something? So now I'm on this place showing something. Now my son's sitting there, putting his head down.
That's awesome.
And it's not for everybody. It might be, appropriate or right just for a short time, just for a season. There's nothing wrong with that either. And even though the word, we put such a bad stigma on words like quitting, all this kind of stuff, Hey, there's nothing wrong with, I'll just use the word stopping rather than quitting. Stopping and going in a different direction.
Yeah.
That may mean leaving. Anything that you're doing that you want to stop.
That's incredible advice, and I believe that to be true as well. It's like sometimes best decisions we make is to quit something to find something better.
Yes.
Or something that better suits us.
Yes.
So.
And it doesn't matter what the world thinks or what the people around you thinks.
Yeah.
Was that your basketball coach? I know Marty was asking you that question. You said you were kind of watching practice, but you weren't really into basketball. Next thing you know,
well, it was a combination probably of back then. The gym teacher was the gym teacher taught wrestling in gym class, so that teacher was the freshman wrestling coach. He had been trying to get me off of wrestling, but I come from Cleveland, I didn't know anything about wrestling, so I just went off with the basketball team. But I didn't play. I just was sat on the bench the whole time, and I hated sitting on the bench. And I might have said something like what that wrestler said to you.
Yeah.
So if you don't get pinned, you get to stay out there longer. I never got in the game. Just let me in the game. I don't care what happens when I'm in the game. Just let me in the game. I go out and I'm out there ready to have some fun. they call timeout, number whatever you get back on the bench. I was out here for like 20 seconds. So that was my experience in 7th and 8th grade. So I was like, and so I didn't know anything about wrestling. So I went off with the basketball team. Anyway, the restroom room was on the way to the gym, and I stopped, and they had a big window. You could just look in the restroom room. And so I looked, and I kind of missed basketball practice one day doing that. And when I say missed, it was like maybe I watched it maybe 20 minutes, a little bit too long. So practice started, so I didn't want to go practice that late. So I thought I could lie and say I was sick, whatever. So then I was going to go to basketball practice the next day. And then that next day, he was ready for me. Because I was watching again. He said, Lee, or Leroy, you got to make up your mind what you want to do. And he helped me make it because I'm thinking, I need to go there and sit on the bench. Or I go in there and I can at least, because there was no one sitting on any benches and everybody was wrestling.
We don't even have benches.
There are no benches.
There's no benches in here.
Hey, I like that.
That's great. That's okay.
There's benches in basketball. There's benches in football. There's no benches in.
I like that. I remember that. That was the reason there are no benches in there. I'm thinking, hey, there are no benches.
If there'd have been a bench over there, Lee would have never wrestled.
I would have been on that bench. I walk in, Lee, go sit on the bench.
World championships. No, Lee never wrestled. There's a bench in there.
I love that. There were no benches. That's it. That's it. I can't believe you thought of that. But subliminally, maybe, you never know. I mean, everybody was up wrestling. I'm looking in the middle, everybody was in a breath. They were just rolling around wrestling. And I'm like, looking at that. And we had wrestling in gym class. So, man, I want to do that. Didn't know how to do it. I want to do that. But I wouldn't have done it because I was on the basketball team.
That's wow.
So he did have a role, the basketball coach. If he would have been more inviting, maybe, and open, and he ushered me in, because I didn't know anything about wrestling. If he came over and just kind of gave me a real positive talk and real positive experience, and
taking the benches away,
and let me play me more, and just say, you know what, you've been working really hard, and we're going to kind of get you in some games, and I would have stayed. I would have stayed because. So I have to thank him. I never thought of that.
Yeah, thank him. So,
but the coach, my freshman coach was Joe Novak. He was the gym teacher, old school gym teacher, just a big burly guy. He looked like a boxer kind of, and he was a wrestler. And he wrestled at Ohio State. He was a Big Ten wrestler, and I think he might have been the varsity wrestling coach at one point, but now he was the freshman coach because he was a little bit older, and. So he encouraged me. He was encouraging me too on that end, and he was the one that eventually said, "Get in here, and 2 weeks you'll be rep by 138 pounder."
Wow!
I'm like, "Whoa, that's cool." I mean, literally, I was on the mat in this wrestling uniform with tights, wrestling in front of a gym, freshman team, cheerleaders, and I won, and that was the real thing that got me in. I won that match. There's nothing like winning a wrestling match in an individual sport. Nothing like that. And then you get the orange afterwards.
Yeah.
Are they still doing that?
I don't know.
You guys did it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was a thing when we wrestled. Now it wasn't a thing for you guys.
Oranges were big because that was sort of like, not only was it healthy, but it was nutritious, and it was like sort of almost like a medal or a reward after the matches were over. Coaches would hand out oranges.
Yes.
Yeah.
Huh. Big box of oranges. And
I don't even know where that thing came from.
Yeah, we had. And
our middle school, it was 8th grade only. I can remember that was the end of the day and the kind of the celebration to get oranges.
Yeah.
I don't know where it come from.
That orange tasted so good.
Yeah, I have no idea, but that was like a reward. It was like your nutrition for the day. I don't know what it was.
It was awesome.
I don't know where it came
nice,
from.
Nice juicy orange, and especially if you won, it tasted really good.
Made that orange a lot sweeter.
Yeah. You could do it today and it would still be appropriate.
It would make, we get a pretty cheap metal too.
Yeah, and it's like everybody put a box of oranges out. I'm not sure we did it for both sides. The opposing team was it was just a home thing.
Probably the home.
It was just a home
Unless
thing.
you brought your own oranges.
Yeah, it was just a home thing. Yeah, so for home matches, we'd have oranges, you know, and
Don't ask me where it came from. I have no idea.
there's just so many positive things from wrestling that and actually just some trivia too. In my senior year in high school, 1974, a junior Russian team toured the United States, and that was the first time a junior team had been into the United States. There have been senior teams for dual meets and stuff, but not a junior team, level team. And Northeast Ohio, they wrestled in about 13 cities throughout the United States. So wrestling organizers in all these various cities, they were just donating their time, and they were just think of the wrestling organizers in the cities that you were from and where you're from. Just think of those key people that were always doing things, tireless, and trying to make sure there were opportunities, cultural exchange trips and all that.
That's how our sport runs.
It's the same in Northeast Ohio. So they, of course, if they were coming to the United States, we're going to have a dual meet in Northeast Ohio. It was not going to be in Columbus. We're not going to let those guys have it. And it had to be one city within a state. So they didn't go to various cities within us, because the Russians wanted the cultural experience of traveling to the various cities throughout the United States. They went to New York, and they did have one in Maine and New Jersey, you know, whatever, all the way across in California and then Ohio. And so we had a wrestle-off and trials, a whole bit. So I made the team, and I wrestled my first Russian. And out of the 13 dual meets in all the weight classes, 10 weight classes, I think America only won 3 matches out of 13 individual. I don't know how many dual meets, how many individual matches that would total up to be, but I won my match. Harold Smith won his match, and then Bob Golick tied. The Bob Golick that played football, he tied the Russian, and then I think, so we had 2 victories, and I think there might have been 2 other victories throughout all those different stops. Maybe, I think no more than 5 victories though that America wrestlers have. But Sergey and Anatoly Beloglazovs were on that team.
Oh, wow.
So we saw them at an early age, and they were, and Sam Komar was on that team. That's a name that you may or may not remember. He was a very good Ohio wrestler. He was a state champ, went to Indiana, wrestled for Doug Blue Ball. We were seniors together. And he was a 2-3-time All-American. Maybe he took second once to Steve Barrett. That's the match that Steve Barrett won. When he won his national title, he beat Sam Komar from Ohio. And Sam got smashed. And we were friends and stuff. He was a lighter weight than me. I mean, he was good. That's just how good the Russians were, man. Right up the line, we had another guy who was a state champion, Mike Walsh. I mean, our whole line was just not just getting beat, getting just annihilated. And the guy that, what's his name? He ended up pinning John Azevedo in the national tournament. He was on the team too, from Ohio. He was a lighter weight, and he ended up winning the national title that year, pinning John Azevedo. But there's good caliber Ohio wrestlers, and each state had their best, really, because it was such a big deal that each state really worked hard to make the venue nice. We wrestled in the Cleveland Arena. It's not even there anymore, but it was the arena at the time where the football team or the basketball team played. And it was packed. Well, it seemed like it was packed. It probably wasn't packed, but the wrestling fans showed up, and it was a great thing. And
it seems like any time that we brought the Belarus team in for even my high school and wrestled a duel back when they would come in and maybe hit like the Sunshine Open or something like that, so they tour through. And anytime you put the Russians against the USA team, I mean, it's immediate sellout. It's like, that's exciting, Russia against USA. So I totally get that.
It was, and to do it so young, and talk about freestyle,
you were still a freshman or
high school. Well, I had just graduated from high school, so it was in June of my senior year in high school. So graduated from high school, and then a few weeks later or whatever, but we were training for it. We had a training camp and the whole bit. I mean, and there was some, I'm trying to think who the coaches were. Like Dave Range, I don't know if you remember that name. He was an Ohio guy who made the World Cup team at 105. So he was, Kim Levels was another guy who made the junior team. He was one of the coaches. Ohio always had a hand in international wrestling. In fact, the World Cup was there for all those years in Toledo. Well, that was before maybe they took it out.
The current year.
But for a long time, the World Cup was in Toledo, Ohio, where you could go watch Gable and back then. I mean, it was cool. It was, and so we had wrestling organizers that were Ohio people, so they made sure Ohio wrestlers got to participate in pretty cool Ohio things, so, and that Russian ended up, he wasn't their best Russian. I think he took third in their national tournament, but he won the Junior Worlds the next year. And that's the year I was in that tournament too. It was the next year, my freshman year in college. But I got injured in my very first match against an Iranian wrestler, and that Russian went on to win. So I was watching that thinking, man, I could have maybe been a Junior World Champion. But it was a close match. It was a 6-5 match, and the dude was bigger than me. That's a whole nother story. I got so many stories.
We're gonna have to have Lee back. We're gonna have to have Lee back.
Oh man, it's just I love the wrestling, but without wrestling, I mean,
I'd like to have another follow-up down the road. And
Please.
One thing with Lee is just, Lee, you've obviously taken great care of yourself. It's like it's a priority for you. It's it's a priority for me, and I know Mike and I have talked a lot about this. Like, maybe especially for coaches, which is sort of, to me, it's like you've got the mental stress, you've got the physical stress, all those things that are combined with going into coaching, that no wonder we have such attrition and so on. But you have made it a priority in your life. I don't know when you particularly made that choice, if it was something sort of you dripped into, but how maybe we could make coaching more sustainable for young coaches by just touching on that, like self-care, taking care of yourself mentally, physically, doing those things so that you don't get lost and all of a sudden wake up and your body's broken down, your mind mentally, you're stressed out to the point you want to check it in. So I'd love to do a follow-up down the road with that.
I think that would be awesome.